Is this a good sack? Was this the right thing to do to help knock this guy out of contention as a potential co-owner of an NFL team?
Yes, I do. I think that it started when the players themselves objected to it based on the fact that Mr. Limbaugh had made certain statements such as saying that the NFL now looked like the Crips and the Bloods without weapons, making derogatory statements against Donovan McNabb. And I think that if you want to be an NFL owner, you have to be accountable for what you say about those that generate the money in that league. And I think that Mr. Limbaugh, who has made a career out of holding people accountable, had to be accountable to his own statements, and I think he ultimately was. Let's remember here, Chris, his name was withdrawn by those that submitted his name. The NFL, nobody disqualified him. They withdrew his name, so he can have all these grandiose ideas of a conspiracy. What sacked him was the people that brought him to the party withdrew him from the party.
Well, let's go over this. I know he made the comment about the teams acting like the Crips and the Bloods, acting like an L.A. street gang against another L.A. street gang. I get that. He has said that he felt that he had said the wrong words that sounded racial by suggesting the names of gangs that are, I believe, mainly African-American. But here's the question. He also made some other comments about Donovan McNabb over the years. I remember that comment saying that the press was in love with the guy because he's an African-American, but he really wasn't that good a quarterback. Well, people who watch the NFL can make their own mind up about that situation. Seems like McNabb's winning that argument. But are there any other statements he's made over his long radio career? He's on about 3 hours a day, every day. Can you add up more than those two comments that might be called insensitive at least?
I mean, there probably are, but I don't think they're material here. Those are the two that I raised to the NFL. Those are the ones that the NFL players raised. We're not talking about his politics here or even his racial views. We're talking about he's asking to be part of an ownership of a team that will vote on the decisions of NFL contracts for players, vendors, stadium workers, and what he says about that industry is pertinent. I think they're trying to broaden the argument. It's a very narrow argument about the NFL and about the privilege of being part of the ownership. He has the right to apply. He does not have the right to be an owner. That's up to the NFL. But what happened here is the people that were bringing him in decided to withdraw him. And I think that all of these other implications really don't deal with the fact that the people that thought he was an asset began to think he was a liability. He's trying now to make this like this is some wounding of American conservatism. He was rejected by his own partners ultimately.
Well, let's take a look at this from another point of view. Pat Buchanan.
Yeah, I think his act was shabby, vindictive, petty. It is disgusting in this sense. Chris, you and I have made controversial statements. The Reverend Al Sharpton in the Tawana Brawley hoax case and the Duke rape case, which turned out to be a hoax, have made statements we regret and apologize for. At the same time, to blacklist an individual, just like they used to do out in Hollywood when they were communists, cost them their job because of something they said when those folks did terrible things. To do this to Rush Limbaugh, look, I heard his statement on Donovan McNabb. Look, we talked in the campaign. Journalists went in the tank for Barack Obama. Some of us said that. Does that disqualify us from a job? He was wrong about McNabb. McNabb had a great season that year, so he made a wrong statement. You deny a man a position like that, this is blacklisting in my judgment. It's contemptible. Liberals used to condemn it.
Well, first of all, I felt that, and still do, that Barack Obama inspired me in that campaign.
Well, I'm not talking about you.
Like in the tank if you want. Let's take a look at, no, I'll stand by my words. Here we are in that regard. Let's take a look at, well, she can respond as well. Reverend.
Yes, first of all, I had nothing to do with the Duke case. So again, let's not rewrite history. I had nothing to do with the Duke case. And my representing someone 22 years ago in the Brawley case is certainly a lot different than someone making statements against people that are saying if he's going to have something to do with my employment, I don't want him involved. And if someone does want to take that position, they have the right to take that position against me, you, or Pat Buchanan. I don't know how you mix apples and oranges. Those players had the right to raise a question about what he said about them.
I'm not saying they don't have a right to do it. I'm commenting on what they did. Reverend Sharpton, if you were part of a group that was going to buy a baseball or a football team, I don't think conservatives in this country would say, no, let's cut that fella out because what he said 20 years ago or what he said down there in Louisiana in that case, the Jenna case. I think Well, look, I don't think they'd stop you.
It seems to me Pat, I think conservatives tried to hold Barack Obama responsible for what his former pastor said, not what even he said. So, I mean, how are you saying that? We saw a whole year where Barack Obama was questioned about everything his former pastor said for 20 years on whether he was qualified to be president of the United States. We can't ask Rush Limbaugh about what he said himself, not his pastor, not his former pastor, what he said.
Sure.
I mean, what do you mean conservatives?
Gentlemen, here's what Rush Limbaugh said about Reverend Sharpton earlier this week. Let's listen to Limbaugh himself.
I know Reverend Sharpton. Sharpton's better than this. He knows better than this. You know, I didn't judge Al Sharpton's fitness to be in radio when he wanted to earn an honest living for once. Given his well-documented past, the author of the Tawana Brawley hoax, I believe in freedom, second chance, and I also don't discriminate.
Pat?
I think Rush makes a very good point. I mean, I've condemned Reverend Sharpton over the years and criticized what he said. I've written columns about him. I'm sure he said things about me. But the idea of going after people the way they're making a living... Chris, the real problem in America is not Rush Limbaugh or Chris Matthews or Pat Buchanan or Al Sharpton. It is censorship. It is people trying to silence people, to cost them their profession, their jobs, because of what they said. Even Michael Savage. People go over the line. What we ought to be standing up for is the right of people to speak their minds and make their living. This is so petty, I can't believe it.
Let's take a look at what Rush said about the NFL. Right. Let's let Rush Limbaugh get in here one more time, then you, Reverend. Here's Rush Limbaugh, what he had to say about the NFL. Let's listen.
It's about much more than me. This is just the latest assault on people who believe in rugged individualism and liberty and freedom, who threaten the whole notion of state-controlled tyranny and the central command authority, which is what is typified by the Obama administration and now the Democrat Party.
Well, that's the question, Reverend, and you're as wise as anybody at this table, obviously, and you can make a judgment. Is this about words? You mentioned two statements he made as objectionable. Fair enough. Were those statements, as objectionable as they are, the basis for denying someone a chance to make a major economic investment in a pro football team? Yes or no? Those two statements alone, you seem to imply that they were disqualifying.
No, what the answer is, he was not disqualified. He was withdrawn. If in fact he and his partners felt so strongly about it, his partners should have fought all the way to the NFL and see if he was qualified or not. Just like they had the right to apply, we had the right to say we oppose the application. He had the right to go forward.
Well, you're dodging the question here. Reverend, did you oppose?
You're trying to misconstrue what happened here.
No.
What happened here is he was withdrawn.
You're taking your own
he was
responsibility aside. I'm just saying you are a powerful voice in this country. When you speak out, let's face it, the buildings shake. People do listen to you. You had a lot to do with the noise level here. Certainly the Players Association was determinant because they are the guys on the field that make the money for these owners. Yeah, we know that. But you got out there and joined their case. Are you saying right now that you think Rush Limbaugh should have been allowed to buy part of that team or not? What do you think? In your judgment, is it based on those two statements by him?
In my judgment, if Rush Limbaugh was part of a group that was competing with other groups, and the other groups were able to show that they could do it financially, and they had not made offensive statements against the players that generate the money, that I would have ruled for the other groups, because I think what Rush Limbaugh did would be something that would be detrimental in competing with other groups. You got to remember, this was a bidding process. And
yeah,
you
but
have the right to bring everything
those two statements is all I'm asking. Those two statements you say disqualified him in your life.
I think, in my life, I would have voted against him if I was one of the other owners, as some of the owners said, yes.
That's the point here.
Well, look, he wasn't engaged in dogfighting, for one thing. He wasn't engaged in shooting himself in the leg. Other guys have been arrested, implicated in murders. Everybody says, give him a second chance, let him play in the NFL. And because he said some sports writers cut slack for Donovan McNabb, maybe they did or maybe they didn't. The idea this is a moral disqualification. I mean, what kind of moral community is the NFL owners?
Many of us supported that Michael Vick should have been held accountable for dogfighting and Plaxico. So we had the right to say that Donovan McNabb, that Michael Vick was wrong, but we didn't have the right to say
but a decent
that
man,
Mr. Limbaugh was wrong.
We're not talking about.
We're not
Cut him
talking
some
about
slack.
him
Let
losing his...
Vick play now.
Pat,
He did his
We're not
time.
talking about him losing his job on the radio. No one is saying he shouldn't be on the air. No one's saying he shouldn't have a job. We're saying he shouldn't be an owner of a team and not deal with what he said.
Well, what did you say
You're
about
acting
Don
like we're taking his
Imus?
livelihood.
What did you say about Don Imus? Didn't you say he ought to be taken off the air?
We're saying that sponsors should not underwrite. We said that sponsors should not underwrite what he said, and sponsors agreed. They withdrew. And Don
Look, you
Imus
ran a
said that we were
campaign
right.
to get this guy
And
dropped off the air for 2
Don
words at
Imus came back.
6:15 in the morning.
And Don Imus came back and said we were absolutely right. He should have been fired. Don Imus would be the best witness for us in this case. He said it himself. He should have been fired.
Are you proud of what you did that case?
Especially after Don Imus said I was right. Absolutely. I think he learned his lesson.
Wow, this is a hot issue. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, as always, sir. Thank you for coming on. I think you were a big part in this issue. I think that you demur on your authority here, I think is wrong. You carry a lot of weight in this country, and you know it.